Hi you guys, today I'm going to be answering a specific request or filling a specific request from some of the newer authors who have come to us. And interestingly enough, I don't mean newer authors as in they are new to writing. Most of these authors, actually the four particular people that reached out to me, have all been writing for about as long as I have been alive. So these are some requests and I'm going to try to fill them. So as you guys know, I started writing very early and I started writing very long. I pretty much started writing novel-length works. So by novel-length works, I mean works that are 50,000 words or more. I was very dedicated to the idea of having a writing career, and I wanted to do things by the book. Even though Walt Whitman had had incredible success self-publishing was not quite the industry that it is today, where pretty much anyone or their brother can publish pretty much anything. So back then, it was go to a big press or don't get published. There were some independent presses out there, but none of them were independent presses that I wanted to be with because they were very much niche presses. So even though I did for a while sign with one of these independent presses, I was actually very pleased to come back several years later, buy the press, and turn it around, make it not niche, but rather more mainstream. And the money that made that possible was me publishing with a New York house. So when I was 17 years old, I graduated from high school. When I was 18 years old, was it 19 years old? Almost 19 years old, almost, about to turn 19 years old. I left on my first of two national tours with a book that I had written called Escape to the Wind. You may have heard of this book. It would have been in the mid-90s that this was all happening. Pretty much every major periodical in the country, in all of the major cities, covered the book in some way or another. It was a dystopian book, so it was set in a post-apocalyptic world, back when that was not really a genre yet. And I was being marketed as a bit of a wunderkind. I'm sure someone's going to correct my pronunciation there. A bit of a kid genius. But the thing that made me super unique in a time when Melissa Etheridge wasn't out yet, and neither was Ellen, was that I had two moms. And my big New York press got a lot of joy out of milking that twist for all it was worth. So, as you guys have already know from past vlogs that I have done, my experience with a corporate publishing house was not my favorite experience in the world. I was used as a commodity and as a product. And when I came off my second national tour with them, which did indeed include all of the things that would make a young writer's dreams come true. The signings at Barnes & Noble, the lines around the block, the being on the cover of magazines, all of that fun, the spots on MTV, all of this kind of stuff. When I came off that tour, the very first royalty check that I got, I went and I bought the press that had first published me, that little independent house. But one of the things that I did learn is that if you are very young and your parents believe in you and they support you, and you follow the rules, you finally get to a place where you are allowed to break those rules. So the rules that I followed, one of them, the four big ones are here, but let me cover one other before we get to these four big ones. And that is, I knew my publisher. I did not submit a book to a publisher until I knew everything that they had published. I knew exactly the kinds of books that they would say yes to. I knew them. I had researched them. I knew their market. So I actually wound up with far fewer rejection slips than most writers like to talk about. And I know that that is a badge of honor, rejection slips, and I certainly got some great ones. As a matter of fact, I even got one from a woman that I later got to know and we became friends that was written in Italian. And she said to me, Ms. DeMarco, you clearly have not mastered use of the English language, so I am writing to you in Italian because I assume that English is not your first language. So that was probably my most colorful rejection slip. The rest of them were just poorly Xeroxed copies of form letters. And if you do not have a desk drawer full of these, I suggest that you send your book out a little bit more so that you can collect those, because again, they are a badge of honor. And also they're kind of fun to look at years later when that book is published. Not self-published, really published. Now I know I'll get a lot of negative comments about that one, but gotta remember I'm pretty old school this way. So growing up, I was taught that if I wanted to actually make it as a writer, because less than 1% of all writers, pretty much everyone's written a novel these days, guys. I mean, they have a whole month-long festival devoted to everyday Johns and Janes writing novels, right? So pretty much everyone has a novel in their drawer. It's no longer really special to have completed a novel. At least it hasn't been for me for a really long time. Not just for me, but for the people around me. That doesn't impress me if you've completed a novel. What impresses me is that you've completed your 4th revision of a novel. What impresses me is that you've been able to work with a professional editor, not your spouse, your sister, your mother, your brother, or your best friend as your editor, but an editor who is actually willing to say to you, you know, this scene makes no sense. Or, you know, I literally skimmed this scene because I was that bored. Or, you know, this character that you want people to like is not likable and you need to fix it. How are you going to fix it? Or the editor who has the guts and the professionalism to tell you, you know, your story begins on chapter 3. The first 2 chapters, we don't need them, and they drag. So let's jump right in. Other than know your publisher, the 4 things I was told to pay attention to are show, don't tell, read in your genre, remember your audience, never forget them, not even for a moment, and write timeless, not timely. These are all cliches for a reason. When your editor or a critique panel says to you one of these things, you need to decode what they're really saying. Sadly, some people use these cliches just to be able to say something, but that's not constructive criticism. They need to be able to take it that step further in case someone doesn't know what they're really saying. So let's take these apart one at a time. Show, don't tell. This means you have a bunch of description and no dialogue. It also means you are telling the story in passive voice instead of allowing your reader to live the moment. For instance, if you have a character who is, or in the narrative, but still, if you have a character who's saying to another character, when Bob walked in, I knew it was all over. I could see it on his face. I could see it in his body language. Our 15-year marriage, it was a sham. There was nothing real about it. See, I'm talking, it's a dialogue, right? The one character's talking to the other, but you're still telling. You could actually write the scene where Bob walks in. The door opened. Susan looked up from her teacup. Was this the time? Was this the moment? Bob stepped into the foyer and took off his shoes as he always did. He carefully lined them up against the wall. They had to be just perfect, just right. Susan remembered when their dog Fifi used to run at him at the door. He would hate that. He loved Fifi, but he would hate that interruption of his perfectly lined up shoes. He turned then, and unexpectedly their eyes met across the room. Susan could see it all. She could see every falsehood in just that one glance. And then he crossed the room. And then the conversation would begin between those 2 characters. That's showing. So if someone tells you, show, don't tell, they're not telling you to give them less description. They're telling you, dramatize the moments that matter. Don't just reference them. Read in your genre. I used to feel very strongly. As a matter of fact, I actually had an author say this to me recently. And I went, oh my gosh, I literally remember saying that. I literally said that exact sentence. A teacher said to me, she was an incredible creative writing teacher. Her name was Sandra Whaley. She said, Jennifer, thank you for turning in this amazing piece of extra credit. It was a novel. You know, you really need to read in your genre. And I said, Sandra, because this was at Summit K-12, an alternative school. All the teachers went by their first names. I said, Sandra, I'm too busy writing in my genre to read in my genre. Flash forward 31 years. And I'm sitting in the office the other day, and a wonderful author said that exact thing to me. And he said, do you know what I mean? And I'm like, yes, I know exactly that feeling. I know exactly that feeling. And it was so wonderful for just a moment because it took me back. And when I think of myself at 13, I don't think of myself as this little bratty kid, because I wasn't. I was so passionate and so excited, and the world was opening up, and I was in this great school where I could literally turn in novels as extra credit, and there wouldn't be teachers that would just be like, oh, you're so brilliant, oh, I'm just going to give you an A. No, it was like they would actually read it and critique it and push me, and it took me back to that moment. It was like time was non-linear for just that split second. And I hope if you are watching this vlog right now, that particular author that was just sitting with me just 2 weeks ago, I hope I didn't look too much like an idiot when I just sat there for a second, because I was in a very special place going back. Reading your genre is something that's so vital, because without knowing it, you could be creating things that are derivative. Also, you could be writing under what your audience is used to. And what that means is you could think you need to dumb some things down, but actually your genre right now is so advanced. Like if anyone has picked up current science fiction, there's so much hard science in current science fiction right now. If you're dumbing down your science, that's a really massive error. How is race being dealt with in your genre right now? Who are the authors that are at the top of the genre you're writing in? Because you know what? You need to know. Why? Not because you want to emulate them, because you have to be different than them. I once, when the kids were very young, for 2 years, when the kids were very young, before Faith was even 2 years old, I used to do the convention circuit. Conventions would pay to, this is mostly the writing conventions, but also some of the science fiction and fantasy conventions, would pay to have me come in and hold 8 and 12 hour, in one sitting, 8 and 12 hour events that I called pitchets. One right after another, no breaks. Yeah, right? I don't know. It's amazing I'm not dead by now. Writers could come in and say, here's my idea. Does it have any chance of making it in the market? And if it does, what agent should I send it to? What press would publish this? What should I do? And because my mind I was like a sponge, all things about the industry. Every book that came out in science fiction and fantasy, I was gobbling it up. Every agent, every interview they gave, every little bit of advice, any vlog, well, it wasn't vlogs back then, any blog they wrote, I was at the top of that game in terms of both independent and corporate presses. And I'm like, I can tell you where to go. And after I had done the first couple pitches and people started reporting back and saying, oh my God, I followed this woman's advice, and now I have the exact agent she told me I would have. I'm published with the exact press she told me to send to. Because I'd be like, well, this publisher is doing this kind of work. Your work fits that. They have nothing like it. Go. I had a young man come up, and we were 5 or 6 hours in, and I had seen him at the back of the room. And people would do their pitches in front of everyone else, okay? And he'd been waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally I was like, hon, do you have a pitch that you would like to do? Yes. I said, are you ready? No, not yet. He sat for another hour. Finally, he came up and he said, here's my idea. Nothing like it has ever been done, and so I don't know what to do with it. It's about an alternate world where certain people, about 10% of the population, are born with these like supernatural superhero type abilities, but they're all over the board, all kinds of abilities. And this one man tries to bring them together in a special school, a school for different young people like he is, but we don't even know that at first. And like I start to hear like snickers in the room, right? But this young man is so earnest. And then he reaches around his neck to like one of those dog tag type necklaces, and he has a flash drive on it. And like, I've never even seen a flash drive before. I mean, we're talking about it's 2002, 2003, but I had never seen one so small, right? And he goes, I've written a lot about the idea. It's all right here. I keep it with me because I don't want anyone to steal it. And that's why I was afraid to pitch it. And I said, have you ever heard of X-Men? And he just looked at me, waiting for me to explain what X-Men was. You have to read in your genre. We tell our filmmaking partners, tally all the minutes, literally keep a timesheet of all the minutes you spend researching, writing, filming, editing, scoring. And if it's not you, if you're hiring other people to do that stuff, then add in their minutes as well. All the minutes it takes to create a film. And when you finally have it done, double that number of minutes, which we all know is going to be hours and hours and days, possibly even months and months. Double that, and that's the bare minimum that you need to spend marketing that film. No one wants to hear that. If you look at the authors who are the top of their genres, you will find several consistencies, and one of them is that they will research a novel as much time as they spend writing it, so equal. And they will revise that novel 4 times as long as it takes them to write the first draft all the way through. Revision, revision, revision. If your words are golden from the moment they fly out of your fingertips or fly out of your mouth if you're using speech to text, then you're not doing it right. The idea of a short story being a beautiful gem that lives on in canon forever and it's the first draft, that's awesome. But that shouldn't be the goal that you try for. The goal that you try to obtain should be a piece of writing that is strong and solid and moving right along. Timeless, not timely. I know we skipped one there, but we're going to go for it. So that's why reading in your genre is important. You have to know your market, because someone eventually is going to have to market your book. No book is just printed on paper or published in ebook form and magically is discovered by the world. Someone has to market it. And that means whether or not you like to compete with other authors, you will be competing with the other authors in your genre. Now, you guys know that I'm always like, storytellers don't compete. There's room for all of us. I'm talking about we readers have a finite amount of money. If you want them to buy your book instead of whoever else is publishing in your genre, there has to be something about your book that is different and unique. Oh, Jennifer, we're all just telling the same few stories over and over again. Yes, and what makes life still interesting is that we tell those same stories over and over again in different ways, in slightly different twists. The puzzle pieces don't all go together in the same way. They can actually create different pictures. They can go together in more than one way. All right. So again, we're going to skip Remember Your Audience for a minute. We're going to go to Timeless, Not Timely. At Blue Forge Press, we don't publish timely books. You're like, violence in our schools is a hot button topic right now. Let's do something on that. No, thank you. I want something that's timeless. Now, violence in our young people, that's timeless. I might be more willing to look at something that tries to address that issue of violence in our schools, but in a broader context. Environmentalism, hot button topic right now. Climate change, hot button topic right now. But this is a book that it's just dystopian. It's talking about the fallout from, can we come back from, something like that. Timeless books are about the human condition. Timeless books don't try to tackle current politics in blatant on-the-nose ways. They can be read now. They can be read 20 years from now. Now, I'm not saying that some books aren't dated. Many of our classic books are dated, as we say. But some of them still stand. When we look at what they're doing now with The Handmaid's Tale, pretty much anything by Ray Bradbury, anything by Orwell. There are some books that simply stand the test of time, and that's, especially at Blue Forge Press, what we're looking for, is books that are those epic yarns, that are those incredible quest stories across many different genres. The quest trope doesn't just belong in science fiction and fantasy. It can be across all genres, even contemporary dramas. That quest, that change, that search for something more, something better, that speaks to the human condition. Remember your audience. One of the most painful things I have seen in terms of being a publisher in the last 2 months is an author making fun of, online, on social media, making fun of their exact target audience of readers. Now, I don't think she knew she was doing this, but she was. The people, the age range of people that would be buying her books 6 months from now, she was poking fun at publicly on social media. Your audience should be sacred to you. And if they're not sacred to you, don't write for them. Email me today and say, I need to talk to you about my book. This audience is not sacred to me. I actually don't care about them. To me, they're just a bunch of wallets. Do it. I'm going to judge you, and I'm going to cancel the publication of your book. But you will be living a more honest life, and I won't have to deal with this when your readers find your post and are horrified that their new literary hero was literally making fun of them on social media. Know your audience. Love your audience. They are sacred to you. Who are you writing for? And if your answer is, oh, I'm writing for all people, all ages, all genders, all countries, my books are universal. They appeal to the whole wide world. Well, then we're going to go back up, and you need to read your genre more. So you need to find books, even if you're like, well, I'm beyond genre. I had an author say that to me once, I'm beyond genre. Or, my book is so unique. I've also got this one. My book is so unique that it literally does not fit in any genre. Well, guess what, guys? There's this thing called BISAC codes. We have to put your book in a genre. So if you truly and honestly don't know how to read in your genre and know your genre, because you don't know what genre your book is going to be in, then this is what I told those two authors so many years ago. Walk into the biggest bricks and mortar bookstore that you can find, even if you have to drive to find it. Not a used bookstore. It has to be a new bookstore, which usually means it's going to be a chain. So it's probably going to be like, for instance, a Barnes & Noble. It has to be new books, and it can't be a library. Again, independent bookstores, used bookstores, libraries, it's going to be a slightly different market. You need to go into the largest chain store bookstore that you can find. Even if you have to drive to find it, walk in and go to the basic age. If you know you basically are writing for young adults, go to the young adult section. If not, go into the general part of the bookstore and start taking books off the shelf and looking at the covers. If you can imagine a cover that you're looking at on your book, you're probably going to be placed in that genre. And that's the genre you then need to read up on. So whichever genre has the most books that appear to have covers like you might want to have on your book, that's where you're going to be categorized. So that is only a rule of thumb that I tell people that literally are clueless about how their book will be shelved. Because you guys, there is no my book appeals to everyone and is all genres section of the bookstore. So I hope that this decodes what some of these editors might not be articulate enough to express to you. And if your editors can't be as raw, as real, and as blunt as I have just been, maybe find yourself a new editor. Or if that's the kind of feedback, just generic statements like this, if that's the kind of feedback you're getting from your writers group or your critique panel, search for a different one. You need someone to be more specific than that. And you need someone that is going to be so in love with your work and see the diamond in the rough that we all write, that our first draft is all of us. You want to find someone who sees that diamond in the rough and says, I would literally go over this with you scene by scene. Let's make this the best book that's ever been written in this genre. And let's make sure that it's not derivative. And it has those unique, shining twists that are going to make it stand out and succeed and be timeless, not timely. Thanks, guys. Hope this helps.